Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to another episode of the Big Movement Podcast. Today we have Kelly Atwood, who is a money, mindset, and sales strategy coach who helps creative entrepreneurs expand their income and impact through their online empire. So we're going to learn how she does this and makes a difference in the world. So, Kelly, welcome.
Thank you, Byron. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. So how did you get into this world of building online empires and sales strategy and so forth? Because, you think about all the ways that, you go through life like, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, and you kind of go, mindset and sales. Sounds good to me. So how did you get into that?
Yeah, well, so I've always been one of those people that kind of flitted between all these different passions. Like one season I would, want to be a fitness coach. The next season I wanted to be an astronaut. Like I was just all over the place growing up. And I continued to do so through my 20s, my teens and 20s, and mostly worked in the food and wine industry. And when I decided to become a coach, my parents were kind of like, all right, like here's just another thing she's dabbling in, and it quickly just caught on and really, I just locked into it right away because it felt like, when you find that thing that you're supposed to be doing, you're like, yes, like you can just feel it. And so I was all about being a coach, and I really wasn't at that time when, I first became a coach. I had no idea really about being an online entrepreneur. I didn't even actually think of myself as an entrepreneur. I was just like, okay, I coach people one-on-one. I help them transform their lives. I was very broad in general with the work that I did with my clients. But I wasn't looking at it from this like big picture perspective of like, I want to be a millionaire. I want to impact millions of people. I want to talk on Oprah. Like I didn't have any of those dreams. But what I did notice happening was that I was totally stuck in my money mindset, and I really didn't know how to sell my services. I kind of had this idea that, once I graduated my coach training program and I made business cards and made a Yelp account and all that, like I just assumed that people would just start coming to me. And, that's generally not the case, especially in the beginning. You've got to like do a little bit of marketing and messaging. And so I just found myself really stuck. And when I made the commitment to really get after my own money stories and clean up my relationship with money, but then also learn how to build confidence around sales and learning and accepting that, being the face of your sales process in your business isn't a bad thing. It's actually like great business self-care, giving myself permission to learn more about that and go with that. It just blew up my business in the best way possible. And so from there, I was like, well, wait a minute, like this just worked for me and I love it. I love talking about money mindset. I love talking about sales. Why am I being so specific with my clientele when I can really like niche down and create programs and content around everything that I just went through? So that's how I got there, long story short. But yeah, and my business has had like a complete turnaround again. I mean, as you know, we're like completely rewriting all the time as we grow and evolve. So now I'm bringing in, we're talking about money mindset, we're talking about sales strategy, but we're doing it on top of this foundation of like complete and total authenticity, and not following the general rules of like, the general strategy and everything that people give you, but more so tuning into like, well, what feels in alignment for me and what's my truth really about? So that's kind of everything in a nutshell.
That is, but those are so critical because the stages of growth that you go through, because you, in the beginning, you fell into that situation that so many people do, that said, I'm going to business for myself and I'm going to put a shingle out there and the masses are going to come flooding along and the only thing that lines up is a cricket.
Yeah, totally. And you think it's about you, right? You start to take it personally, like, oh, I'm not good enough. I don't have the expertise. I don't have all that. but it's not. You have to do a little bit of work to get there, inner and outer.
Right. It's so true, because if you think about it, the people that inspire, thousands, hundreds, or whatever the audience is, most people didn't just wake up one morning and go, I've got this, I'm going to do it. They had to grow. It was, you think about, like using sports analogies, it wasn't like someone, if they're at the top of their game, if they're in the Olympics, they just woke up one morning on their couch and go, that looks like fun, I'm going to go do that. Tomorrow. They had to grow into that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I always say too, I've gone through a lot of situations in my life that I could look at as being these giant triggers for a huge piece of personal growth, like a huge, period of personal growth. But nothing has propelled me into that more than running my own business, becoming an entrepreneur. And even more specifically, when I decided, okay, no dream is too big. I'm really going for this. I want to impact millions of people. Ever since I made that decision, the universe is okay, well, let's, work through all these things first. And here's just a whole bunch of stuff you're going to have to work through before you can up level there, So I always tell people, I'm if you want the best personal development experience, just become an entrepreneur, start your own business.
It's so true, because you have to grow. No matter where you start in life, it doesn't matter all the experience that you have, there's growth involved to become the person that you need to be. Mm-hmm. It's just how it works.
Yeah.
And so obviously, you've created this business here. What was it that you started doing in the beginning after you realized, you put a listing on Yelp and nothing happened? What did you start doing both internally and externally to attracting the clients that you needed? Because obviously you just can't sit around and go, I'm an entrepreneur. Do you work with anybody? Not yet. So you had to change it.
Yeah, that was hard. Well, I wasn't really that understanding of how I could use social media in the beginning. And so I wasn't really, I don't even know what I was doing. I look back on the first 2 years of my business and I'm what was I doing every day? I don't even remember. It must have just been a bunch of busy work. But when I really started to shift things, I had some rock bottom moments with my money. I had always struggled with money my whole life. It was my thing that I just couldn't seem to break up. And for a while when I started my business, I was really trying to kind of avoid that. I needed to deal with that. And it's hard to avoid being in money breakdown when you're an entrepreneur, because it's, you're not getting a steady paycheck. And so it really took a couple of rock bottom moments for me to really make the commitment internally that if I wanted to go to the level that I wanted to go to, which at that time, at this time that I made the decision, I had a couple of clients. I had already started to sign clients and things, but I was still struggling with money. And I just knew that there was no shortcut, that I had to do the inner work, and so I just started buying every book I could possibly find about wealth consciousness and money mindset. I hired a coach that to me at the time felt so completely out of my league as far as what I could afford and the level that I wanted to play at. And I took a leap of faith. I signed the dotted line, having no idea where that money was going to come from to pay her. And of course it showed up. I enrolled in a couple of sales courses to learn sales. And I think actually the biggest thing that's helped me, actually not just in this part of my journey, but in every single piece where I've really wanted to up level and I've been up against fear and all of that. I gave myself permission to live into the result that I was trying to create. So at this time that I shifted everything around and I just filled up my practice and I had people literally knocking down the door to work with me. It was really all about me getting aligned with that woman who was making 10K a month, because at the time that was the goal. I had only ever made like 3,000 in 1 month period up until that point. And I just got really connected to like, okay, if I was already making $10,000 a month, who would I be? How would I be? What's the energy I'd be bringing to everything, not just to my business activities, but, you know, to dinner out with friends, to a phone call with my parents. Like, who is that person? And it's not that I was acting as if or trying to become somebody I wasn't. She was already inside of me. I just needed to tap into her. I needed to give myself permission to step into her because, you know, from a law of attraction standpoint, which is something I practice, you create your results from the inside. And a lot of us are walking around sort of responding like, oh, I don't have those results yet, so I can't be that person. I've got to, you know, stay over here where I'm at. Let's be real. This is where I'm at. And it was when I decided, no, I'm going to be that person now before the results showed up. That was probably the biggest piece for me in turning everything around.
It makes all the difference in the world when you give yourself permission and then you shift your mindset, because you think about it. Once you started doing the things that a person who's making $10,000 a month were doing, then everything else starts coming into play, because you think about it from a different standpoint. It's about abundance. If someone's looking at like, well, they're only making $3,000 a month, and then the actions they're taking are in accordance with that, then they're not going to be able to grow, because that is that level. Versus if you know that you need to bring in 10,000 a month, oh, you should be talking to X number of people per day. You should have this many funnels online. All these types of things, they will take place, and then that becomes the new reality, because you're always having to act as if you're there to actually achieve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was like a simple shift really about, you know, when you're in the beginning of your business and you don't have any clients yet, or you've got a couple, but you don't feel like you're great at signing clients, it's like you get into this energy of like, oh man, like I'm so blessed if somebody will work with me. Like, please just work with me. You know, you get into this, I hesitate to say desperation, but it's like you get so excited when somebody signs up to work with you, as you should, but it's almost like you're surprised and you feel like they've done you a favor by signing up with you. But, you know, if you're living into your results, you're acting from, you know, when I was acting from the 10,000 a month coach, then I took on this energy of like, well, of course you want to work with me. I'm kind of a badass, you know, and like
right.
That energy like took over and spilled into my actions. So yeah, I was making more sales calls. I was being way more bold on my sales calls. The actions had a totally new energy. And I noticed too, when I was in that energy, in the 10K energy, that I was taking action much faster. Like things just felt easier because I wasn't making such a big deal about everything. It was just like, yeah, this is what you do, you know?
Right. Exactly. Because the actions you take when you, I don't want to say you diminish the effect on them, but you make it into an everyday routine instead of like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. It's kind of like, yeah, you just do this stuff. It shifts how you go about it. There's no longer this awe where there's this hesitation. Like, what if I screw this up? Like, if you do it the same way that you treat it as breathing, then it becomes easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I know a lot of people shy away from, I don't know, maybe they don't, but I feel like a lot of people think you don't need to like create habits, you know, like habits of success in your business. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And I'm a totally different person when I'm not practicing habits, not just in my business, but in my life, you know, like I'm very into my fitness. I'm very into my relationship. Like in order for us to move forward, we need to line up our actions. And sometimes in the beginning, those actions feel really uncomfortable. So we don't want to do them. Our resistance comes up. We make up all these excuses. Like, I don't need to do that. And when we start creating consistency in our habits that lead us to the success that we want to have, no matter what realm of life it's in, it gets easier and easier. Like you were saying, it's just, you know, you don't sit down and stress out like, oh my God, I need to write a blog post. Oh my God, how am I going to do this? It just happens. It's just a part of your day, just like brushing your teeth or taking your dog for a walk. So
Right.
I think it's really important. And I think a lot of people are sort of just kind of winging it and not being intentional with like, okay, if I want to get to this level in my business, what do I need to put into place to get there? And like, am I willing to move through the resistance when it feels like I just don't want to, you know?
Right. It's all part of that growth of being strategic with everything that we do. Because when you're just winging it and you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping some of it sticks, that's when life is in a state of chaos where you never feel like you're getting ahead versus you approach it with a systematic plan of this is what I will make happen today. And then you do it. And the best part is you find that you have more time to do the things that you really want.
Yeah, you have time to live.
Right. It's like, what did I do today? Well, I was at my desk. And then I went back to bed. Like, oh, okay, that sounds really exciting. So
Yeah.
you have to focus on how do you make things so that they run themselves, that you go through the motions to make them happen, that it's not this large chore like, oh my gosh, I've got to climb Mount Everest. This is going to suck today. You should never feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like a big part of my sort of newest evolution of my message to my community is that your business should feel fun, right? Like we didn't get into this business to feel like we're slaving away at a corporate job again, you know? And I think sometimes we're just so conditioned, especially those of us that came from working a corporate job or just, you know, maybe being in school a long time. We're so conditioned to think like, you know, we've got to do things a certain way, even if we don't want to. And there's a difference between like feeling resistance towards an action that you know you need to take and like feeling out of alignment with something that doesn't feel good, you know?
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you have to be in alignment. You think about the number of times you hear somebody, they go into business for the wrong reasons. They'll do like, well, I hear people make great money at it. But
Yes.
if it doesn't resonate with you, you will wake up every morning feeling miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. And Byron, I'm going to be honest with you and everyone listening. There was a point in my business where I was in it for the money. Like I was in it for the money. And it's not that I didn't want to be of service. I think a big part of it was that I was struggling so badly with money. I just felt like I needed it to be a financial thing. But it's not fun to just work for money. There's nothing fun about that. You have to have like, there has to be some passion in there because what happens is like, if you're working just for the money and then you get the money, you're like I've actually experienced this. You work for the money, you get the money, and then you're like, why do I feel so not joyful right now? Like this does not feel fulfilling whatsoever. Like, great, I can go, you know, buy this and buy that and have a fancy steak dinner, but like, I'm still waking up feeling like totally uninspired, you know?
Right. Think about the number of people, ironically, since we're talking on a Monday, that they wake up on a Monday morning thinking, oh, crap, I got to go back to work. And they're angry about it. They're not looking forward to it. So they go through that never-ending cycle, like, okay, I survived Monday, it's Tuesday, okay, I'm actually getting work done Wednesday, and then they start checking out because Friday's almost here, and they're ready to go out and party again, and then the cycle repeats itself. Instead of, when you're passionate about what you're doing, you're like, it doesn't matter what the day is, you wake up thinking, yes, I get to help somebody today.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a hard time with that for a while because I think there's this thing where people are like, oh, you want to make sure that you're not working too much, you're not hustling too hard. And I get that. Like self-care is important. It's important to take breaks and to actually enjoy your life. Not that working on your business isn't enjoying your life, but I had this thing where I was like, oh, I can't work too much. Like I would literally schedule it in as if I had a 9-to-5 job. Like this is the only time I'm working on my business. And then, you know, it would come Saturday and all my friends would be going out to like day drink at a bar. And I'd be like, I really want to write the sales page, you know?
Right.
And like feeling like I wanted to shame myself a little bit for that, but then being like, no, this is just like one of the luxuries of, you know, creating a life of your own design is that you get to do what you want in your business. You get to take action on your business because it feels good, not because you think you have to, you know?
Right. And the other beauty of that is that when you love what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work. So if I'm creating something, it's like, oh, this is fun. I knocked this out. And other people like, but you didn't watch the whatever TV show? Like, no, my TV hasn't been on in I don't know how long. I couldn't tell you what most of the things are on TV. I watch something occasionally like on Netflix and like Amazon Prime, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Sometimes it's funny. Like I have a couple girls that I mastermind with, and sometimes it'll be like 1 o'clock in the morning on like a Tuesday, and I'm like working on something, and I'm like, I kind of want some feedback from the girls, and I'm thinking like, oh, it's too late. It's too late to text them, and I text them, they're like, they're both up working on stuff too, and I'm like, oh, we're all doing the same thing. This is great. And we're not pulling out our hair. We're really enjoying it, jamming out to music, having a glass of wine, working on our stuff. So it's really fun. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Right. And here's the other thing when you think about it. When you start shifting your peer group, and this is something I think people have to grasp onto, you realize there's more people who are going to do that, who are going to be up at midnight, 1 a.m, working an idea because that idea struck. They're like, yes, I have to get this out of my system right now while I'm thinking about it. Strike while the iron's hot. Versus other people like, we're in the bar, we're partying and doing all this other stuff. But then the flip side is, the people who just are always in that partying mode. Anything wrong with going out and having a good time. But if you fast forward 12 months, you look at the difference between where you are and the things you're able to do, and then where they are, and they're in the same place.
Yeah, and I can speak to that personally because I spent all of my 20s. I lived in California for the majority of my 20s, and I was a total party animal. I was at the bar all the time, like every single night. I had the best time. It was really fun. But at the same time, like at night, I was partying. In the day, I had all these things that I wanted to create, and I couldn't really quite figure out exactly what I wanted, but I knew that I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to lead. I knew I wanted to create. Like I knew all of that inside me, but I A, didn't know where to start. I B, didn't think that I was cut out for that because my self-confidence was pretty shot at that time. But I would dream about it during the day, and I would never take any action because I didn't know how. I would just keep going back to that bar every night. And so I was on that hamster wheel, for 8 years, just every day being exactly like the last. And I actually had that thought this morning. I went for a run this morning, and I was thinking about, gosh, my life 5 years ago, maybe more, 7 years ago, is so different from what it is now. And now it's like the growth is just exponential. And it's not to say that I don't, go out and have nights with my friends like that, although they're not as crazy as they used to be. But it's just the focus has shifted so much. It's just insane how much we can create when we focus on it and when we get into alignment with it, and we really get clear on what we need to do to get there and how we need to think, So yeah, I can just totally relate to that personally.
Right. It's just that transformation we go through because we have to evolve. We have to realize that to grow, we have to change our behavior, to change our daily patterns, to do the things that we want. Because we live in this world where I don't want to say people that there's this high level of comfort, but to get past it, because you think about the conditioning that we've all gone through, and we have to break that. If you think about when you were growing up, how many times did you hear the term of just go to school so you can get a great paying job? Mm-hmm. And then you'd see that people say, okay, you got to put away money for, so that way you can retire, down the road. You hear all these things of what life is supposed to look like, but then you just look at and ask one question. Anywhere along the way, did you ever have someone when you're growing up saying, let me show you how you can build a business for yourself and how you can create a lifestyle that you want instead of a lifestyle that someone dictates for you?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think we live in a very fear-based society, which, I understand why. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, but I think we forget collectively and sort of deny our own inherent power, really. Like, we are actually all free when it boils down to it because we have freedom of thought, But I think I think a lot of the things we do as a society are very much geared towards just staying safe, so whether that's safe in our incomes, safe, I don't know, there's a million different examples of staying safe, but there's this idea that being an entrepreneur is a very risky thing. And I actually look at it a different way. I think like, oh man, if I had stayed, like, that's more of a risk for me to stay in a career that didn't allow me to fully thrive, just because I thought it was the safe thing to do. Like, that feels risky. That feels emotionally risky, physically risky, financially risky. Like, everything about it feels risky to me.
Oh, yes. Well, think about it. If, in terms of risk, that as an entrepreneur, someone might focus on, but you have to go out there and get your clients, you could do all these things, like, yes. But then when you decide that you want to make more, what do? You create a new program, you offer a new product, you get another client, or whatever it is. You're able to grow your business. You're able to increase your income. Versus when you're working for somebody else, it's all in their hands. They say that there's no pay raises this year. Guess what? You're making the same thing. If they decide that, oh, we're making cutbacks, well, guess what? You're making less. You have no control over it. Or if they decide we're outsourcing everything, or we're reframing our business and your department's no longer needed, it's gone. So I'm with you. Like, to me, that's more risky because there's no control over the outcome. You can only influence it and hopefully that it stays in your favor.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm going to Paris next month, and I have not bought my flight tickets yet because I really want to fly first class. I've never flown first class on purpose. I have this so this is part of my money stuff that I'm working through right now, is like stepping up to the next level financially. I've got to let go of some of the judgments that I might have about luxury and people who fly first class. Like, I've got to work through that for myself. And so part of that is me just buying the first class ticket and sitting there and allowing myself to be up there, and knowing that it's in service in a really big way, because when I'm fully sourced and fully taken care of, I'm able to be more creative and more of service to my clients. So anyway, I was just thinking like, okay, I'm not going to buy this ticket yet because I want to create the money to fly first class. So that's the thing. It's like, and I was saying it to a girlfriend. We went out for wine last week. She is not an entrepreneur. And I was like, yeah, I really want to fly first class. And she's like, well, how are you going to do that? And I was like, I'll just like run a sale or sell a new program. And she was like, you can just do that? And I was like, yeah, that's part of what we do. Like, we get to just call the shots and be like, hey, I'm launching this. This is what's happening, So, but it was like such an eye opener for me because I've forgotten what it's like to be capped in that way. So yeah, it made me so grateful. I was just thinking like, oh man, it feels so good to have that level of responsibility,
Right. And here's another way of looking at it. When you're sitting in first class, business class, and so on, think of it this way. Who are the people that you want to connect with? That you're more likely to connect with someone that can open a door for you if you're sitting, let's say, in business class or first class. And so and also think of it this way. You're going there for the first time. Go in style. Be relaxed versus, oh my gosh, I can't feel my foot.
Yeah. I think we need to give ourselves, I might go off on a little tangent here, but I think we need to give ourselves permission, like, as a whole, to step up, and to rise up and to step into whatever we want and not be ashamed of that. Like, if you want to fly first class, go for it. If you want to create $100,000 a month in your business, go for it. I think so many of us are afraid to afraid to shine our lights too brightly because, we're afraid of how we'll be perceived. We'll think that, we're being selfish or whatever. We have many different judgments around that. But, a lot of us, I think, are holding ourselves back just because of that, just because of the way that we've sort of, defined what wealth looks like or what it means,
Right. Exactly. Because everything regarding wealth, it's all about perspective. Because, I've heard so many things where, I've heard people say that, oh, you have to have X amount of dollars in order to live a fulfilled life. And then you'll see other people say, oh no, you don't. And it comes down to something simple, right? Philosophy. It's what allows you to do the things that you want to do. Because you look at, let's say, some island nations in the world where people are happy. They're doing all the things that they love. If you were to look at how much they're making, you would think, how can someone be happy? But then you'll look at them. They're doing what they love every single day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, money's just a tool. I
Right.
mean, that's all it is.
Right. Because you think about some of them like, oh my gosh, they get to go out on a boat every single day. They're out fishing. They're swimming. They're doing all these fun things. And yet someone would say, well, but you have to have money. Like, they're proving you don't. So it comes down to, you have to look at what amount of money will allow you to do the things you want to do. And then you build the business to achieve that. Mm-hmm. So it takes away from that, oh, everybody has to make a certain amount. Like, well, I've met people that they decided, well, in order for them to scale their business, instead of them living like in New York City or some high-priced places, they moved to places like Thailand. So they dropped their monthly expenses, and then they were able to scale their business so much faster. And in the process, they were living life a whole lot bigger than someone who was barely getting by trying to build their business someplace where it's more expensive at. Was it an adjustment for them? Oh, yes. But you know what? They had fun along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And this is a conversation. I love that you talked about perspective, because I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but I've always thought the more skin in the game. So say you're like hiring a coach or a mentor, you're investing in a new program. I've always believed the more skin you have in the game financially, the more you're going to show up for the coaching program, for the course, whatever it happens to be, because you've got more invested, financially, and therefore most likely emotionally, energetically. But what I didn't realize when I really first began to center into that belief, what I didn't realize was that it's all relative. So like for me, investing $30,000 in a coach, that's like a lot of skin in the game. For somebody else, like I have a $97 a month program, but to me, $97 is like, that's less than my phone bill. Like that doesn't feel like a lot. And so I worked through this belief of like, well, are people going to fully show up for this program if they're only paying $97 a month? And then, so I had this conversation with whoever it was, I can't remember. And we were talking about, well, that $97 a month for that person might be might be equivalent to your $30,000. Like it's all perspective, right? So, I love that. It's like, it doesn't matter what level you're playing at. And I think there is like this thing too. It's like, you've got to want to make $100K a month in your business if you're really going to go the next level. And like the next level is whatever it is for you. And there's always going to be more,
Right.
So.
And it's great that you mentioned in terms of like, if you have that, you invested $30,000 in a program, but then you have that $97 product and how people perceive it. It goes with where people are in their journey, because so many don't necessarily see like, well, how can I offer a particular program? But because each and every person is in a different phase, that for some people, like, hey, create that lower price product, and then as your notoriety grows and your experience grows, then you can create ones that you're able to command larger fees for, because it's that growth process. You think about what you're doing right now with your higher end programs. If you were to turn back the clock to day one, would you be able to do the same thing?
Yeah.
So it's that growth process. And I heard it best from somebody, one of these days I'm going to remember who actually said this, but it comes down to, don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 10.
Yeah. Yes. And that actually brings me to another thing that I want to talk about real quick. And I know I'm kind of like veering off here, but I think there's also this misconception that okay, so I believe in quantum leaps. I've experienced them personally. I know that they can happen. But I think there's a little bit of this fantasy amongst new entrepreneurs where they want everything to kind of happen overnight. And the reality is, it's like, you've got to go through the process. And everyone's journey is different, but like, you've got to go through the journey. There are no shortcuts to anything. anything I believe that you want in your life, there's no shortcuts. You've got to do the work, whatever that looks like for you. So I think sometimes there's people like that are just getting frustrated because they're like, oh, I just started my business 3 months ago and I don't have a client. And I'm like, welcome to being an entrepreneur. Like, you've got some work to do, and it's just, I think what is really beneficial for people is when they allow themselves to be in the process and they don't necessarily accept or get comfortable where they're at, but sort of embrace it as part of it, right? So like knowing that like, yeah, Sally Sue over here is at chapter 10 of her process and she makes X amount of money and she's got X amount of followers and whatever, but like she had to go through chapter 1 in order to get there, and her chapter 1 looked different from your chapter 1, but it's just as crucial as a part of the process as it is when you quote unquote make it. You know what I mean?
Right. It totally is, where you have to just, you have to do those things accordingly. Otherwise, you end up in a fantasy world, because I think that's unfortunately what happens in the entrepreneurial world. You get people who paint a rosy picture like, oh, you can make all these things happen, blah, 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 instead of, here's the journey that you're going to go on. There's going to be people who can do it extremely fast, and there's going to be people who are going to take longer. But it's because every journey is different, that you don't know the background somebody might have. In some cases, because of someone's, like, let's say, corporate background or what they were doing before, they have a ton of contacts that they can call day one, and then next thing you know, within a week and a half, they have a solid list of clients for themselves. Versus somebody else who's just starting off and no one knows who they are. They have to first build up their name, build up that notoriety, and then they can be able to pull clients in. Mm-hmm. It's all different.
Yeah. And I like that too, what you said about everyone showing a rosy picture, because, I did that for a very long time. And part of that was my desire to focus only on what I wanted, right? Using law of attraction principles. And so it was a good thing for me, but I noticed that people, my community, really needed to see an example of a leader who had obstacles and struggled with stuff, and like, I think it's really important for us as leaders online to really open the door and show people like, hey, this is what it looks like when you're doubting yourself. This is what it looks like when you've got a hiccup. This is what it looks like when you've got a hater. This is what, just being willing to show people what's real about the process. Because I think it keeps people, it keeps their head in the game, because they're like, oh, okay, this isn't supposed to be like sunshine and roses all the time. But it's relatable, and it also gives them actually better value, because when they see how you approach a situation of self-doubt or of, losing a client or anything that could go wrong, and they see how you respond to it and how you use that to go forward, I think that's like priceless for your community to see,
It is, because we have to show that aspect. You bring up the notion of having haters. It's a lesson that people have to understand, that no matter where you are in business, as you grow, you must learn a simple lesson. Not everybody is going to like you. There's going to be some people that outright hate what you're doing. And it's part of life. And it's not because of anything that you're doing. It's because of them, what's lacking in their world. And that's how they react to things. But if you are not attracting haters, then you're not doing enough to get your name out there. And I think it should be something where there should be like an award, like it's the Celebrate Your Hater Day, that, like when you celebrate, like when you got your first hater, because that meant you're doing the right things in terms of growing your business.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I went out to dinner for my first hater, like celebrated. I actually had one the other day, which was a pretty intense one. And I like opened up a bottle of wine. I was like, we're celebrating, because, if you're not polarizing your audience, I personally think if you're not polarizing people, not your audience, but if you're not polarizing, you're probably not speaking the full truth of what you need to say and what people need to hear,
Right. It's a matter of, if you think about, say, if you're to look at just draw a line out there, just visualize a line, and you have one end polarizing view on the far left, and you have another polarizing view on the far right. And then you have that line down the middle. The line down the middle, that's playing it safe, where you're not really doing anything to rough up the waters. But you got to be somewhere between extremely polarizing and the middle, because then you're attracting the people to you. Because when you're too far polarizing, people are like, man, that person's a nut job. You don't want to be that crazy in what you're doing. But,
yeah.
But you want to be where it's like, oh my gosh, this person makes sense. And people know, like, you're making a stand of stating what you believe in and not really caring that someone's being negative. Like, oh, you're negative. Congratulations for your opinion. You have that permission. Now go someplace else and play. Don't do that.
Yeah. Get out of my sandbox.
Right. This sandbox is mine. You see a planet flag and it says, do not enter, specifically you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. And it really does attract, like, the more... Well, I'll put it this way. Every single time I post something that's really from my heart, that, I post a lot of different stuff, but lately in particular, I've really been saying, like, no filter, just saying what I feel. And yeah, the haters have been coming out of the woodwork for sure. But I also have had, in the past, 2 months since I've really been stepping into this even more fully, I've had way more people reaching out to me like, oh my God, your post the other day, like, it made me leave the job I've been thinking of leaving for 10 years. I made this decision. And it's almost like I kind of look at it as, if you want to make an impact, it's kind of your responsibility to say the thing that, some people aren't going to want to hear. Because the people that need to hear it, they need to hear it. Like, you've got to say it. There's people out there that are watching you and they're following you and they're hanging on to every word. So why not tell the whole truth? Why not say the thing that's really going to have an impact,
Right. That's so true. You have to say that, because if you don't step onto that comfort zone and start stating what you're feeling, what you're thinking, then your voice will fall upon deaf ears, because it sounds like everybody else instead of, what is it that's your voice? What is it that you're truly meant to put out there? Because that's what's going to resonate. Because you have to build your tribe, ultimately, that your tribe is going to look different than mine, and so on and so on. And it's because of who we are. And what people have to realize at the same time, they can be doing essentially the same type of work, but because they are different and they're stating things that are true to them, at the end of the day, they will attract totally different audiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the other thing to think about, I say this all the time, that, there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. It doesn't matter what you're doing. There's more than enough people to go around.
Yeah, I know. Down with the competition. I am not into that at all. There's enough clients for everybody.
Right. And because you think about it, for you to build an amazing lifestyle, how many clients do you really need? Because the scariest thing I said, but I might miss out. Okay, you need what? You're gonna have a membership site, and you want to make $100,000 a month. Okay, let's just say you're charging $97. Great, so you're gonna have 1,000 people. Let's do the math on this one. 1,000 people out of 7.5 billion. Really?
I know, and I've heard, a lot of people are like, oh, everyone's a coach now. There's so many coaches, and I've heard this term about the saturation of the market, which I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily how I see it. I look at it like, well, how many doctors are on the planet?
Right.
Because, whether you're a coach or an entrepreneur, if you're showing up online, you've got your own business. Generally speaking, you're looking to further, it's not like this money hungry internet scam thing, right? Those people don't generally last very long online. So, we're all here because we want to make an impact. We want to be of service. There's 1 million doctors. So why wouldn't there be 1 million coaches or 1 million consultants or whatever?
Right.
Yeah. There needs to be a lot of us. We're needed,
Right. Exactly. There's room for everybody out there. It's just a matter of you have to create the growth that you're wanting to have, and you put yourself out there. And, when people have that limiting belief, but there's not enough. And this is what I tell people all the time, that I've been out to places where I'm just networking and I'm just being social, and I will ask them, have you ever heard of someone like Tony Robbins? They're like, who's that? So here it is, a person that's known by millions of people, and there's still a whole lot more that doesn't know who he is. To put in perspective for people, like, if you have someone like that, where there's still tons of people that don't know who he is, trust me, there's room for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great way to look at it. It's so true. Like where was I recently? And I was talking about Gabrielle Bernstein, who I mean, you know her, obviously. Yeah. And she, like, her book, she wrote that book, Spirit Junkie, back in, I don't know, I read it in 2011. It, like, changed my life, reading that book. It was the catalyst for me becoming a coach. And I was talking about her to somebody the other day, and they were giving me, like, kind of this blank stare. And I was like, you know Gabby Bernstein, right? And they were like, no. And I was like, how do you not know Gabby Bernstein? Like, I'm blown away. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, we are in this sort of this sector online, the entrepreneurs, that we kind of assume that everyone knows what it is that we do, and they don't really get it, you know?
Right.
So it's interesting.
It's just one of those things that we have to overcome. But everything, when you look at business success, it's about the mindset, that it doesn't matter what type of business you have. It doesn't matter what you're going to do, what are you going to sell. If the mindset is not in the right place, everything else doesn't matter.
Totally. That is, like, I agree with that. So, I mean, that's like the basis of all of my work, because I watch so many people that are like, oh, if I could only find the right strategy, if I could only find the right coach, it's like they're looking for a magic pill that does not exist. The magic pill is in your mind. And I think a lot of people want to skip over that because they think it's too woo-woo, or, you know, they don't think it's going to work, or they don't want to put in the time. And honestly, like, if you're a beginning entrepreneur and you're listening to this, it's like, I would suggest the thing that you put primarily as your focus is your mindset, and let the rest of this stuff kind of be the other 20%. Or if you're like, you know, if you're a seasoned entrepreneur and you're looking to up level and you're experiencing a lot of fear and doubt, like, you've got to do your mindset work first and foremost. It's so important.
Exactly. Mindset is everything. If it's not in the right place, nothing else matters. Mm-hmm. So as we begin wrapping things up, what's one thing that you recommend for every business owner, for every entrepreneur to do to start creating the success they've really been wanting to have in their business?
I would, if I could give one piece of advice, I would say give yourself permission to let go of all the ideas about who you should be and what you should be doing and all of that. I would actually, so I'm a big journaler. I journal at least once a day. And when I do this practice, when I feel like maybe I'm out of alignment or something, I will sit down and I will get really honest with myself. Who am I? Why am I doing this? What do I really desire? How do I desire to create it? What's in alignment for me? And get really clear on what you want. Because I think with social media, and, you know, connections that we make with other people in our field, it's like we tend to look around and kind of take on what everyone else is doing and look at other people, the solutions that others have found, and think that they're the right solutions for us. And really at the bottom of it, at the foundation of it, your business will start to take off when you allow yourself to be fully yourself, and you allow yourself to do it in the way that you want to do it. I'm like a rule breaker online. I do not like to follow the rules. I did for a very long time. Yes, it made me money, but I was not happy. I was actually a little bit depressed. So do you want to make money quick and be depressed, or do you want to build a sustainable business that just keeps growing and growing and feel, you know, joyful when you wake up in the morning? So I would just say, sit down, have an honest conversation, an honest journaling session with yourself about what it is that you really desire, and give yourself permission to be yourself. You know, I always say to my clients, like, I have a lot of clients right now that are kind of hung up on this whole, like, I've got to be professional thing. So they won't get on a live stream if they don't have any makeup on, and, you know, their baby might cry in the background. They're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And it's like, hey, you know, your clients, your community, they want to know you. They don't want to see you putting on a performance. They want to see you. So don't be afraid to show up and show people who you really are. Don't be afraid to talk to people as if you're sitting across, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, you said it's like we're just sitting down having coffee. Like that's the way that you need to communicate with your audience. So it really just boils down to just allowing yourself to be who you are.
Right, exactly. It's so critical. You've got to be yourself. Well, I want to thank you, Kelly, for coming out to the Big Movement podcast today. And how can people reach out and learn more about you and what you offer?
Well, I have a free Facebook group called the High Vibe Manifestation Group. So I do some live streams in there, lots of posts and stuff in there. Or they can come check me out at www.kellyatwood.com. And that's everything about me is on that website, so they can check me out there.
Oh, awesome. Well, once again, thank you for coming on to the show today.
Yes, thank you. This was great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.